Okay, class, so today, as part of our social studies curriculum, we are going to be learning about the First Amendment and the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. So first, we're going to begin with the discussion activity. Thank you. Okay, so our question today is, what are your rights as students? Can anyone give me an example of something that's a right to them as a student? Yes, Veda.
The right to learn.
Yes, the right to learn. Lexi?
I can have a recess.
Yes, you have a right to a recess as a student. But what if you guys didn't have those rights? What if I had the right to never give you recess ever again? Or if I took away your lunch period?
That wouldn't be right.
Yeah, it wouldn't be right, would it? Okay, so moving on, we're gonna break down some vocabulary. Some of these you're probably familiar with from last year, but some of them may be new to you guys. So first we're gonna talk about the Constitution, which is the written set of rules that guides how a nation, state, or organization runs. Our founding fathers created the US Constitution as a set of rules to help guide us that we still use today. So our next word is amendment, which is in addition to the Constitution. So they continue to add amendments even till this day, changing and updating the Constitution. And one of our most important words today is going to be right, which is your freedom that's protected by the laws in the Constitution. Next is going to be religion, which is a set of beliefs and practices someone lives by. So like Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, there's millions of different religions that people use. Our next word is press, which is news media, including like newspapers, websites, news channels, etc. Anything where you guys would be able to find out about current events. Next is assembly, which is a group of people that are gathering together. It's like when we have an assembly in the gym, you guys all sit together as a class. And then our next word is petition, which is like a request to someone higher above, like a superior or authority figure, or even like a boss asking to change something. And our last word today is going to be speech, which is the act or ability to speak. Much like how a lot of times politicians give speeches to say something really important to them. Okay, and then next, what is the First Amendment? So this is directly from the US Constitution. This is the actual First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting on establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Okay, so that is our First Amendment right. And the 5 parts of the First Amendment are typically called the 5 freedoms. So our first freedom is the freedom of speech, which protects our spoken and written words, art, symbolic actions. It does not protect speech that inspires violence or hate or threats to people. A good example of this, which is a real life scenario that happened in 1969, would be Tinker versus Des Moines. It upheld the rights of students to express their thoughts and opinions in public schools after some students in a high school were wearing armbands to protest the war. And this court case today is what helps defend the freedom of speech. And there's a lot of talk about social media and misinformation online and how that's influenced by freedom of speech, because our founding fathers didn't know what social media was. Technology wasn't that advanced, so it's kind of a gray area right now. Okay, next is going to be freedom of press, which means the government is not allowed to control or censor the media, which means they can't pick or choose to hide certain things from us in the media. So it's an essential freedom because it allows the press to inform the public about current events and government actions, as well as social issues in society. An example of this would be the New York Times versus the United States in 1971, which reinforced the right of the press to publish classified intervention without censorship from the government. So they were able to provide classified documents that they gained access to, and the government was not allowed to stop them from doing that because of freedom of press. And next would be freedom of religion, which means that people are allowed to follow any religion they want without government control. It also means that there's a separation of church and state. Does anyone have any idea what that term means?
Like between, like if there's something religious that goes on in your family, you don't have to like bring it to school or something like that. Like you get excused from school and things
Yeah,
like
that's a
that.
good example. So, the separation of church and state basically means that the state can't be influenced by the church and like vice versa. So, you can't force your religious beliefs on someone else, especially in regards to the government, and that's protected by freedom of religion because we all have a right to practice whatever religion we want to. That also means that people are free to wear religious dress, like how Muslim women typically wear the hijab. You're allowed to celebrate holidays of your religion and express your beliefs. Our next one is freedom of assembly, which means people are allowed to gather as groups and protest or express their beliefs and ideas. Sometimes there are specific rules for assembling a group, such as like required permits if you're in a public area, like a park or something. A common example of this, like throughout history, would be the Civil War protests, the anti-war protests during like the Vietnam War, because people didn't want the United States to go to war and invade Vietnam. And another example would be the civil rights marches, like with Martin Luther King Jr. in the 60s. Okay, next is the freedom to petition the government, which means people are allowed to complain or make requests to the local, state, or federal government to ask for change. Ways that you can do this include writing letters, making petitions, which is kind of like a long list of names of people that also support the same thing that you want to bring to the government, as well as protesting. An example of this in real life would be like environmental protections and civil rights have started from people petitioning the government. So a lot of our history has come from people having to petition the government. Okay, so for our first activity today, as a group, we're going to create a tree diagram together. So you guys know a tree diagram starts with one singular part and then breaks down into several. So our first point is going to be the U.S. Constitution, which holds the First Amendment. The next step would be the First Amendment, and then we're going to break that down into the 5 freedoms that we just talked about, as well as some real-life examples that you guys are going to come up with. So I'm going to fill it out on the computer with you guys and ask you some questions. Okay, so what is one of the first freedoms?
Speech.
Sorry, guys. Okay. Yep, speech is a good example. Okay. And what would be an example of freedom of speech that you would think of in real life?
Like what political party you're voting for?
Yeah, like you can talk about what political party you are voting for. Okay. What is another freedom? Yes, Veda.
Press.
Okay, freedom of the press, yes. And what is an example of that?
Wasn't it like the news can't hide anything from you? Was it this one?
So basically, it's the government like can't stop.
You can post whatever you want, like online, and the government can't really stop you unless it's illegal. Right?
Yes. So like freedom to share information, info online, as long as it isn't harmful. Okay, what's another freedom? Yes, Veda.
Religion.
Yes, religion. Okay. And what's an example of us practicing the freedom of religion? Yes, Lexi.
Being able to wear a hijab in school settings.
Yes. Okay. What's another freedom? Yes, Lexi.
Assembly.
Okay. Okay, and what's an example of us using the freedom of assembly?
Like a school assembly?
Yeah, like a school assembly, like you are allowed to have assemblies at school where all the students and teachers can gather to learn information. Okay, and what is our last freedom? Yes, Lexi.
Petition.
Yes, that is correct. Okay. And what is an example of us practicing the right to freedom of petition?
Like when a lot of people come together, if they're like protesting for the environment or something.
Yeah, so that's definitely one example of petition is people trying to get the government via protesting to change environmental laws. Okay, perfect, guys. So next, we're gonna do a whiteboard activity. So everyone, you'll need your whiteboard and either your tablet and then a marker if you're using a whiteboard. Okay, so is everyone ready?
Yeah.
Okay. What we're gonna do today is I'm gonna share some different real life examples and you guys are gonna decide which freedom you think it represents. So our first example is the local radio discusses the presidential debate. Okay, speech and freedom of press. So this is actually a difficult one. It can actually be both. It can fall under both categories, so you guys are both right. I have freedom of press written down, but it actually does equal both. Okay, next, a student writes a letter to the principal asking for a longer lunch period. Okay, yes, freedom of petition. Because they're petitioning their superior to ask for a change. Okay, next, a group of students meet after school to discuss creating a new club. So think about it this way, it's a group of people coming together. Yes, that would be freedom of assembly. Okay, our next example is a family attends church to celebrate a holiday. Okay, yes, freedom of religion. Okay. A customer writes, oh, I spelled right wrong, but it's okay. A customer writes a review about a product they purchase online. Yep, that would be freedom of speech because you're able to post whatever you would like on social media as long as it's not harmful. Okay, next I'm gonna have you guys create your own tree diagrams and then we're gonna review them.
So just write this thing on our whiteboard?
Yes, so go ahead and take a minute. and we're gonna fill in the blank spaces and then give examples. So what comes right after the U.S. Constitution?
The First Amendment.
Yes, Lexi, the First Amendment. And then you guys are gonna write down the 5 freedoms, and then we'll go over examples together. Okay, whenever you guys are ready, give me a thumbs up. Okay, everyone's ready. So, first, of course, we start with the U.S. Constitution, which includes what? What's our first blank?
First Amendment.
Yes, Veda. Okay, and then the First Amendment is broken down into the 5 freedoms. So what's an example of freedom? Yes, Lexi.
Freedom of speech.
Yes, freedom of speech. And what would an example of that be? Yes, Veda.
Like posting that you like something on social media.
Sure, yeah. You have a right to share your opinions on whatever you would like. Okay, then
Should we write that?
yes, you can write it. Okay, what's another freedom that we talked about today? Lexi?
Freedom of religion.
Yes, freedom of religion. And what's an example of that?
Going to church.
Yes, going to church. You have a right to go to church under the freedom of religion in the First Amendment. Okay. What's another freedom that we talked about? Ada?
Petition.
Yes, you have the freedom to petition. And what's a good example of the freedom to petition? Lexi?
If you don't like something in particular, you could get a whole bunch of people that feel the same about it with you and get them to sign a paper and turn it into an authority.
Yes, so if you disagree on something, whether it's your local or state government or federal government or your school, you can collect signatures on something called a petition, which is a form where you have people signing that all agree on a certain change, and then you can bring it forth to whichever level of government you need to share it with. Okay, and then what's a 4th example of a freedom? Lexi?
Freedom of assembly.
Yes, freedom of assembly. So what's a good example of people assembling? Beta?
Like meeting in a group. Like maybe like a book club.
Yeah, a book club's a good example. You have the right to join together as a group and discuss books and things like that. And that's kind of how it works for other clubs too. Like we have a lot of clubs in school right now, or sports teams. Those are all examples of your freedom to assemble. Okay, and what is our last freedom that we haven't talked about yet? Beta?
Press.
Yes, freedom of press. And what is a good example of that? Lexi?
The news sharing valuable information with like its county and things like that.
Yeah, it's important for everyone to stay informed of the area where they live and keep up with things like government issues and like local information. And the local news is responsible for helping keep people updated on that information. Okay, good job, guys.
Can we erase or do you want
Yep, you guys can erase. Okay, so now I'm gonna test your knowledge. We're gonna do a Google form quiz that should be in your email that I sent to you. So this one, it won't take you too long, but we're gonna match examples that I give you to the correct freedom. So it'll be a drop-down menu in your Google form quiz. You guys have 10 minutes to complete it, and when you guys are done, you can go ahead and submit it, okay?
Got it.
Okay guys, now that you guys have finished the quiz, our very last activity today is going to be your exit ticket. So what I want you guys to do is you can either scan the QR code or go to gosoccertib.com and enter the room name, which is just my last name, Cassida, and you're going to answer the 2 questions that I assigned you guys, okay? And then whenever you guys are done, we're going to go ahead and go over it. Okay, so thank you guys for submitting your soccer tip activity, and you guys can have free time now. So thank you guys for participating in my lesson, okay? You guys can have a 5-minute break before we move on.